For the first time in more than 5.5 years, we finally tonight have a few new answers to a question that has loomed over Indiana and over the town of Delphi. Who killed Abby Williams and Libby German?
From the end of the bridge to, you got to go through. Now, I believe that the bodies were found about 50.
Born from a family's grief and determination. In April of 2020, Army soldier Vanessa Guillen went missing while stationed at one of the largest military installations.
That little music in the background that goes, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious."
Right.
Knew about it or was there. He's as guilty as the person who committed
Chilling details in the arrest of a suspected serial killer caught before he could strike again.
Him, they dropped the ball, man. Like they said, he went AWOL, and that he was a deserter, and nobody went to look for him.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder.
Like I said, we're going back. We were asked last time to kind of talk about the food, the grub truck video, and kind of give our perspective of it. The press release from the police department, it indicated that they're still trying to put pieces together from that night. Does that worry you at any point or at any bit that they're still trying to put those pieces together?
It's been over 5 weeks since little Kaylee Anthony vanished. Her mother, Casey, has been arrested for lying to police. She's being held without bail.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me is Big Blue. Blue, how you doing, my man?
Doing good, man. Just enjoying my afternoon.
Oh yeah, that sounds good, man. That sounds real good. Well, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. You know, we've gotten to the point in the Bryan Kohberger case where there's not really much going on looking forward, except for a couple of trials, which is things that are going to be going on in court. But what we wanted to do is kind of go back, look at some of the things that were happening early on, like the press conference, and kind of listen to what they say and, go along with what we know now. There's been a lot of things that people have, I think, maybe perhaps misunderstood or misconstrued, and it's been a long time. Memory's kind of tricky, so maybe perhaps it's just remembered wrong. Well, let's go back and look at some of those things and see what we find. What do you think, Blue?
Yeah, let's see. Let's get a refresher of what came out in the beginning. Yeah,
exactly. So let's go back to the first press conference. All right. I'll say thank you to everybody that is here and has joined. We appreciate everybody. Please hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Also, if you guys can do us a favor, if you talk to anybody about the case or anything like that, like have friends that are interested in this, share our podcast with them if you wouldn't mind. We'd appreciate that. We're trying to grow the channel and reach and increase our reach. So we'd appreciate that. But all right, let's go back. Let's start this.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Chief James Fry with the Moscow Police Department. The last spelling of my name is F-R-Y. I'd like to introduce Moscow Police Captain Roger Lanier, Colonel Kedrick Wells of the Idaho State Police, University of Idaho President Scott Green, Dean of Students for the University of Idaho, Blaine Eccles, and Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson. This incident has shaken our community, has continued to shake our community, and we continue to mourn for the victims. We will continue to vigorously pursue the investigation and pursue justice in this case. It is a complex and terrible crime, and it will take some time to resolve. Today, we want to clarify what we know and where we're at in this investigation. Our primary goal is public safety and to get a completion of this case and bring someone to justice. We continue to dedicate all the resources to this investigation. We've had 646 tips received, and all will be processed, vetted, investigated, and cleared.
So 600 plus tips. This is just, I think, like 2 days after the murders. So already they're coming in pretty quickly. Now, I was gonna fast forward to something, but we'll just wait till we get to that part. Let's continue this. What do you think? Wait, hold on. What do you think, Blue, about 600 tips in a matter of days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of tips, a lot of good information, or bad information. But I think at that time, it was good information because there wasn't a lot of people like trolling this case.
Right.
After a while, that's when they started getting all the false tips.
Right. No, I understand that. But, 600 tips in the first couple of days, like, I wonder what those tips were. Like, because obviously none of them panned out. It took the IGG to discover who Bryan Kohberger was. I'm just kind of, curious as to what kind of tips there were. Obviously, I think there would probably be some that, people at the corner club, people at the Sigma Chi party, those places where any of the witnesses or the victims were, the grub truck. I would assume some of those people would have tipped in saying, "Hey, I saw that person that night at this place." You know what I mean? But that's not. I don't think that's 600.
No, maybe, but I think it would help them at least give them a timeline of where they were. So that those tips do eventually help a little bit.
Yeah, true story. Let's continue this.
We've done over 90 interviews in this case so far, and the Moscow Police Department is utilizing the assistance from the Idaho State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Latah County Sheriff's Office. The personnel that has been assigned to this from the Moscow Police Department is 4 detectives, 24 officers, and 5 support staff. Federal Bureau of Investigators. We have 22 investigators in Moscow. 20 additional are assigned and located in the Treasure Valley, Salt Lake City, Utah, and West Virginia. We have 2 behavior analysis individuals from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. For the Idaho State Police, we have 20 investigators, a public information officer, ISP forensic services, and a crime scene team. We have 15 uniformed troopers to assist our community to help provide the additional resources for our patrols. Detectives are looking to develop any content that would help us in this event. Anyone who has observed any notable behavior or has any video surveillance or can provide relevant information about these murders, please call our tip line at 208-883-7180. Or you can email the tip line and that is tipline@ci.moscow.id.us. At this time, I would like to introduce Captain Lanier to give you some additional information.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger Lanier. I'm a captain over the Operations Division for the Moscow Police Department. My last name is spelled Lanier. I just want to first state that this tragic murder has shaken the community. It's been very hard for members of the community, and it's been equally difficult for our officers and for the investigators. We will continue to put all of our resources towards investigating and bringing this to a resolution.
So right there, he said that this was, extremely difficult to the officers and stuff. These are officers that are trained into seeing some of the, I don't want to say, fatality accidents, some of the more gruesome, there we go, scenes. You have fatalities, whether they're accidental, homicides. I know that there's been at least 7 years since one had occurred there in Moscow, but there had been other, homicides. I think there was drowning, or not, maybe not homicides, but or a person that lost her life, whether it was by their own hand or drowning or alcohol induced. And, this scene was so gruesome that these guys and some of these guys that have had experience that have probably seen some more, some of the more gruesome things in life, it affected them. And so, and I hear things like, college students were in there cleaning it up, or we're in there, we're talking about this inside of that house and doing all this stuff. I don't see it. I don't connect the dots there. I don't see how not one of those college students that are supposedly there, they don't freak out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's weird. What are your thoughts on that situation, Blue?
I mean, I think that they did freak out, man. I don't think that that those stories are true because I mean, you can see that even to go to the court, they didn't want to go. Bethany had to get subpoenaed. You know what I mean? They I think they're traumatized by it.
Right.
By what they saw.
Yeah, exactly. It was something so gruesome that it affected these guys. So, you know, if you go listen to the a celebration of life, or you go watch the celebration of life, where Hunter Johnson, Ethan's best friend, goes up there and he has a speech. You can tell he's still very, very shooken up. You know, he saw the scene. He saw his best friend there. You know, and he had a hard time just lifting up his head. He was looking down the entire time, shaking, you know, holding back his tears as much as he could. And this had been some time later. You know, if this was like some fraternity kids, right? You know, you'd have to say that you'd have to think that some of them were Ethan's friends as well, because, you know, that was what the rumor was, right? That Ethan got in a fight with somebody from his own fraternity or something like that.
Yeah.
So if some of these guys were from the fraternity, they were from Ethan's fraternity too. Not one of them like freaked out. Not one of them wanted to help, called 911. You know, this guy or these people took out three lives. You know, they weren't worried about somebody else talking. You know, I think you'd probably find somebody else unalived. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, for them not to talk about it, if it was like one of the theories that's out there in the internet, that it was one of the fraternity people we got in an argument with or fight with. I mean, if it was that gruesome to the police, I'm pretty sure one of them would have talked. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, look at the defendant that's being charged. He's not talking. He's not saying a word. You know, so people can be strong.
Yeah. So, but in this situation, I just feel that if, you know, given how gruesome it was, I find it highly unlikely a group of young people, that all of them, 100% of them across the board, were so callous to have seen, you know, or have known about a situation and not contacted law enforcement, not freak out about it, not call their parents about it. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
All right.
Here's what we've determined so far. On the evening of November 12th, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen were at a local bar and were later at a food truck in downtown Moscow. They arrived home at approximately 1:45 a.m. on the morning of November 13th. Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle were at the Sigma Chi house before also arriving home at approximately 1:45 a.m. Two surviving roommates were also out in the community, and they returned home at approximately 1 a.m. and did not wake up until later that morning.
All right. So first thing he said was that Kaylee and Maddie, I'm sorry, they arrived at 1:45. We know that it was 1:56 later. Now, they changed that time, in my opinion, solely because the Goncalves family was making a big, you know, thing about it, saying no, they didn't get home until 1:56. Now, the reason why, you know, you might, you know, hide or keep certain details away from the public, or maybe even go to the extent of bending the truth, is for the integrity of the case. You know, for instance, the Scott Peterson case. He went out. His claim is that he went out fishing, and that while he was fishing, that his wife Lacey Peterson was abducted. Now, police and media revealed where Scott Peterson claims he was that day. So after that, they found the remains of his wife and unborn son. Now, his argument is that because the media and because the police released that information, that the real person that may have committed this crime may have dumped the bodies there knowing where his location was in efforts to frame him. So you have to keep some of those things close to the vest, and it's not going to be always because of something that severe in that type of situation, but that is one of them. Another thing is you do have people that will come in and take credit for crimes they didn't commit. There's John Benet Ramsey, I think, is one of the crimes that a lot of people have come forward saying that they had committed it and they don't know the details of the crime correctly. And those details are the details that aren't in the public, aren't in the media. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, they definitely had to keep part of it, kind of hidden from the public. So when they take the trial, they have what actually happened, and they can recant with the defendant what happened. Some of the details, because there's a lot of, I think what they call it, copycat. No, not copycat. Can't remember what the person's called when they take admission of credit of crimes.
Yeah. There's been a few of them. That's what I was saying. Like even in the John Benet Ramsey case, there's been a few people who've come forward saying that they've committed that crime. Any high profile crime, you'll find people that have tried to take responsibility or credit for it.
Yeah.
And you have to keep some things quiet in public that only the killer and only law enforcement would know. That way, in case somebody did come in, you can, and said, for instance, nah, man, if somebody came in and confessed to this crime and said that this crime happened between 2:30 and 2:45, well, we know that Kaylee was calling Jack and texting and leaving voicemails. Well, we know that she was alive after that. Yeah. Right. So, you know what I mean? You can't say, oh yeah, you know what? It happened earlier when and there's evidence that she was alive at a different time. And that's kind of why you keep that stuff a secret. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
All right, let's go. Let's do this.
On the morning of November 13th at 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was placed to the Whitcomb Dispatch Center reporting an unconscious person. The call originated from inside the residence and was made from the phone of one of the surviving roommates. Moscow Police Department officers responded and located 4 victims, 2 on the 2nd floor and 2 on the 3rd floor. The Latah County coroners conducted autopsies, and detectives have been provided with the results of those autopsies. We know that the autopsies confirmed the identity of the 4 victims, determined the cause and manner of death as homicide by stabbing, and determined that it was likely all 4 victims were asleep during the attack.
All right, so he's saying that it's likely that all 4 victims were asleep during the attack. Again, this is another example if somebody were to come into that house or come into the police department and say that, I did this. Well, how did you do it? I did it with a knife. They were all asleep. Well, they know that Xana wasn't asleep, right? Well, maybe. I think this was within the first week, right?
Yeah.
So they may not have had the download information about Xana being up at 4 a.m. or even getting the DoorDash item at that time. So,
yeah, I mean, they were still piecing things together at this time. I think it said 3 days ago.
Yeah, this was like within a week, I believe.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I know you guys will. Let me know, if you guys know, because this just says a year ago. It doesn't tell me what date it is. I wish they would give me the exact date on YouTube. But let's see. If they didn't know that yet, that tells me that they had evidence that would have made them think, or lack thereof evidence that would have made them think that somebody was awake. Make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, that's if they're being honest. We right now, what he said is that Dylan and Bethany went to sleep and they woke up later on that morning. It's not entirely inaccurate. I know that they later say that they slept through the incident, which I know that is inaccurate, but that could have also been to protect Dylan, and also they may think or have thought that the person that committed this crime may have not seen Dylan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then if they released that she saw him, he would panic and run.
Right.
And they would, they want to make sure that this person doesn't get too far.
Right. And I know that, we have to put everything in perspective, right, as to when this person came forward, when that person came forward, when they learned these things, because not everything is learned at the same time, right, or is up front. So I know that there was a DoorDash order that came in also, and that person turned themselves in and self-identified who they were, but we don't know when they did that. We know that happened, obviously, prior to the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, because it was on his probable cause affidavit. But we don't know, like I said, is how much earlier before then. So let's continue this.
Some of the victims had defensive wounds, and each victim was stabbed multiple times.
All right, so he felt that they were asleep during the crime, had defensive wounds, and multiple times. Now, defensive wounds doesn't necessarily mean that there was evidence of the victim hitting or striking or scratching. Sometimes it is, but it's not always that. Sometimes it's putting your arms up, and in that manner, getting cuts on your forearms from trying to defend yourself, or on your hands trying to defend yourself.
There was no sign of sexual assault. Investigators have determined 2 areas of interest within the city and have provided maps which are on our Facebook page and on our website. And these are areas that they have canvassed for additional surveillance video and tips, and have contacted several residents in the areas. The areas are generally south of Taylor Avenue to Palouse River Drive and west of Highway 95. Detectives have also canvassed several other neighborhoods looking for evidence, looking for additional surveillance video, and contacting residents and speaking to them to see if they may have heard or seen something. I want to address several areas of speculation, conjecture, and misinformation that has circulated on social media platforms and otherwise. We do not believe the following individuals are involved in this crime: the 2 surviving roommates, a male seen at the grub truck food vendor downtown, specifically wearing a white hoodie.
So then this obviously came out after the grub truck video. I wonder how much longer after the video it came out, but it wasn't relatively long. I think that video came out like days after the incident, because people had brought up it was on a Twitch stream. Is that correct?
Yeah, I want to say it was at least probably a week, maybe. I remember the sister is the one that got the video from the grub truck owner.
It wasn't the rideshare guy, the private rideshare guy is the one that disclosed that information to Olivia, that he had picked them up at the grub truck and that they have a string going on there. So that's how they got, word of that video and how it got to, everybody so quickly. Let's go. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. I see what they're saying. I'm not aware of that. And I do and have talked to Kaylee's mom, Christy, and I'm not aware of any of these claims that they're saying in the chat.
A private party who provided rides home to Kaylee and Madison in the early morning hour of November 13th. Additionally, the identity of the 911 caller and the 911 call have not been released, so any information out there is speculation about that. Investigators are aware that multiple phone calls from Madison and Kaylee's phone were made to a male subject. Any online reports stating that the victims had been tied and gagged are not accurate.
So at this point, Jack DeCore is not cleared, because that's the person that Kaylee was calling and texting. And he didn't say that person's cleared, right?
No.
He said they're aware of him, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Detectives seized the contents of 3 dumpsters on King Road and searched those dumpsters in an effort to find additional evidence, but nothing of note was discovered. Early in the investigation, local businesses were canvassed in an effort to see if any fixed blade type knives may have recently been purchased. And currently, there are no suspects in custody, and we have not located a weapon. I want to assure you that every investigator involved will continue to put all of their resources and all of our partner agencies' resources into continuing this investigation. We do appreciate the community support. We understand how stressful it is, and we will continue to work through this situation. At this time, I would like to turn the mic over to Colonel Wills from the Idaho State Police.
Thank you, Captain. My name is Kedrick Wills, Kedrickwills, and I serve as the Director of the Idaho State Police, and I appreciate your attendance this afternoon as we talk about this horrific crime. The murders of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee are a tragic loss to all of us. Nothing we can do will bring back these young lives, but we have an absolute commitment to working together to solve these senseless murders. And the way that we know how to do that is partnerships. And our partnership with the Moscow Police Department, with the Idaho State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the University of Idaho to bring this issue to a conclusion and bring this to justice is absolute. We continue with Idaho State Police resources here on the ground in Moscow and throughout Idaho. Whatever the needs are, that's what we want to do. And the chief spoke about the Idaho State Police resources that are here, and he spoke about patrol resources. And we have those uniformed troopers here in Moscow and on the campus of the University of Idaho to help people to feel safe and to provide that security to the people that are here, both in the student body as well as in the community at large. And we will continue to do that as long as is necessary throughout this time. In addition, that's in addition to our forensics team that was here, in addition to our investigative team and all the other state police resources. We know that people want answers. We want answers too. As was already mentioned, this is really, really difficult for those investigators, those dedicated professionals who are investigating this crime. And a lot of people have expressed their desire to help. And the best thing that most of people can do to help is to stop with any kind of rumors and just seek official information that comes out of the Moscow Police Department. Anything that we have that we can share from a law enforcement perspective, we will be sharing just as soon as we can, because that's how we think that we can get this to conclusion. Please rely on official sources of information, and please be patient. I understand that everybody wishes that this was solved already, but these things take time. It takes time to work through. You heard the stats of all the tips and everything, the interviews and everything that's been done. This takes time for our investigators to work through. So please be patient as we work.
This is important because, everybody recalls that Washington State University located Bryan Kohberger's vehicle on November 25th and turned it over by the 29th or something of that nature, right? They took pictures of it on the 29th and reported that they had found it. And a lot of folks think that, well, it was reported on the 29th of November that moment right there, they turned that over to the investigating detective for the Moscow Police Department. And I think they also think that that was the only white Elantra that they had gone out there and found. Now, Bryan Kohberger is the person who's gotten arrested and charged for this. So you're not going to see the information of all the other people who the Washington State Police went out and found, all the other white Elantras, because those people weren't arrested. They're not the ones that are being charged and arrested and about to go to trial for quadruple homicide. It's Bryan Kohberger. So all those people, we don't know. So that white Elantra that they went and found on November 29th could have been one of many on that day that they found. I mean, think about it. They discovered it, November 25th, and they didn't get out there till the 29th. That kind of tells you that if they had, if they were going through all those white Elantras, it took them that many days to get to it. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you, Blue?
Yeah. No, they did. They had a lot of leads they had to follow, and I'm pretty sure not all the help that they got were there right away in the first couple of days. It took a little time to get all the agencies together.
Right.
So it takes time to cooperate together.
Yeah, 100%. And at this point too, you're looking at, there was, when law enforcement look at the vehicle or look at what they're looking at, obviously when the FBI comes in and says that, hey, we think it's a 2011, 2013 Hyundai Elantra, they're going to focus on those vehicles. But prior to that, it was probably a focus of multiple vehicles, just wide sedans. We know from different articles that they were looking at a 2019 Nissan Sentra very early on in the investigation. Then it was like a week or so later when they have concluded that it was a 2013 to a 2011, possibly, white Elantra. Well, up until that point, they're probably gathering all white four-door sedan Elantras, and that's probably what makes up the 22,000 white Elantras that are in the vicinity. And we also have to know what that vicinity is, because I don't think it's just Moscow and Pullman. I don't think they have 40,000 people combined. Maybe they do, but to have 23 or 22,000 of them driving a white Elantra, it doesn't make sense. So it's probably like a statewide, and Washington statewide, those type of, how many of those vehicles there are. I mean, they even looked at the one in Eugene, Oregon, based on the airmail article. So they were looking a pretty good far distance away. So with that being said, just because they had his name and car information on the 29th, or they wrote it down on the 29th, doesn't mean they were looking at him on that day.
Through this investigation, we owe this to these young kids, to these young adults. We owe it to them, and we are absolutely dedicated to make sure that happens. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce the University of Idaho President Scott Green.
I'm gonna fast forward this to where they get to the questions.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize until a little while ago the prosecutors are going.
Oh yeah. Bill Thompson's there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're gonna be working real close with the police department and FBI on this case.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're going to open it up at this time to about 8 to 10 questions. We ask that only one question is asked per person, please. And I would also like to just see if there's an Argonaut reporter here. I think it's only fair to give our student reporter the first shot.
Speak up if you're in the room, if you're from the Argonaut.
Are you from the University of Idaho Argonaut? Is anybody from the University of Idaho Argonaut? Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ted Williams, Fox News. You all have said that these killings are targeted. Can you?
This guy's like, I'm looking for people from the Idaho University newspaper. This guy's like, I'm from there. Look in the mind. He's like, I'm from Fox News.
Yeah. I think nobody got up. That's why they went ahead, but that's pretty funny though.
Just something I thought was funny. Let's go back to what you were saying.
Good afternoon. I'm Ted Williams, Fox News. You all have said that these killings are targeted. Can you share with us why you believe they are targeted killings? And do you know who, if any, of the victims were the actual targets of the killings?
As we stated earlier in the previous press release, or press conference, we believe they're targeted because we take a totality of all the circumstances that we're looking at. Do we know any one person that it was targeted? We're not able to say at this point in time due to our investigation, but we still believe that. But we, like I said, we take a totality of everything that we're looking at.
So the reason why I think they thought it was targeted was, we got to look at what they knew at the time. What they knew at the time was that Kaylee Goncalves had been broken up with her boyfriend recently. They knew at the time that her boyfriend was at the corner club with her that night. They knew at the time that she was calling him at about 3 o'clock in the morning, or up to about 3 in the morning. So at that time, when you have the gruesomeness of the crime, you have a knife being involved. I'm sure there's a little bit of complexity there and some head scratching, being like, and there's no forced entry. You know, you're thinking, well, this guy might have access to the house. He's a boyfriend, might have a key, right? So every indication probably at that point is pointing at that Jack Core, this was like some sort of domestic issue, family violence, right? And even the mayor had came forward and said that, you know, this looked like some sort of crime of passion. So I think that in the moment they may have said that this was a targeted event because they thought that based on the information they had at the time. But as you can see, they're already kind of walking that back, which means that it's not what they initially thought it was. They probably got some evidence to indicate that. Thank you so much for Summers Myers with your $5 super chat. We appreciate you so much. And also thank you to Afton Ford for donating and gifting one Drunk Turkey Show membership. I didn't get a chance to do the membership yesterday. I'm going to do it tomorrow, so keep tuned for that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys so much. All right, so let's continue this.
Chief Glenn Mosley, Idaho Public Radio here in Moscow. On the resources, do you have the resources that you need?
We do have the resources. It is an incredible outpouring of what we received from the Idaho State Police and from the Federal Bureau of Investigations and Latah County. Anything we ask for is given. So at any time, if we need additional, all I have to do is call the colonel, and he will provide that. He's already guaranteed me that, and I know the FBI has said the same thing.
Hi, Emma Epperly from the Spokesman Review. I know you said you're not going to release who the 911 caller was, but was the killer the 911 caller?
I will tell you no. Actually, if we could just go to this one first. So what I'll say to that is it was made from the roommate's call or phone, excuse me. And we're not going to divulge who made that call it's part of our investigation still. And when we get ready to release that, we will.
Hi, Christina Corbin with Fox News. The male subject whom the women called, has he been ruled out as a suspect or person of interest?
Everything that we have taken from those calls, we have followed up on, we've cleared, and we believe that there's no connection there.
Gotti Schwartz, NBC News. Just following up on the 911 call, you said that you don't believe that's a killer. Can you conclusively rule out the person that called 911 from inside the home as a suspect in this case?
Can you go ahead and just ask that one more time, please?
The person that was inside the home that called 911 that was not one of the roommates. Can you conclusively rule that person out as a suspect at this point?
I don't think I said that it wasn't one of the roommates. I said that it was used with the roommate's phone.
Somebody asked if that was the killer.
No, that's correct. So will you clarify that for me?
You're not confirming a roommate called 911, but you used the roommate's phone. So is there someone else at the home other than those two roommates?
There was other friends that had arrived at the location.
How many?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure at this time, to be quite honest.
Do you guys have any idea if the killer's still within the community, or are you looking outside the community for the killer in terms of their physical location?
We are looking everywhere that evidence would lead us. I can't say if the person's here. I can't say what community the person's in. We're utilizing every resource we can to make that location of that individual. And part of that is the safety of our community is paramount, and that's why we brought in the resources that we brought in to keep our community as safe as we can. I cannot comment on that. I'm not even aware. We're looking everywhere. I'm going to take two more questions.
Do you still believe this attack was done by one perpetrator? And if so, how does one individual kill 4 people at night and not wake up the other 2 roommates?
Our investigation will continue to look at all avenues of that investigation. I cannot disclose any of that information. I don't even know that information at this point in time, and that's why we're continuing to investigate.
You don't know how this happened without the other 2 roommates hearing it or waking up?
We do not. One more question.
Hi, Angela Palermo, Idaho Statesman. In the press release yesterday, you confirmed that the victims were found on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the home. Can you say which of the victims were found where?
I'm not going to go ahead and disclose that information. They were found on the second and third floor. And that's as far as we're going to go with that part of the investigation too, because all those key pieces do come to play later. So we do thank you. We thank you for meeting with us. We thank you for helping get information out. And I can assure you, we will continue to work hard. We will continue to do everything we can to solve this. So thank you.
All right. So, kind of listened back to some things. And at this press conference, there's nothing that he said that wasn't inaccurate, in my opinion, especially what they knew at the time, right? I'm going to answer some few questions, and then we'll go back into the second part of the second conference that they had. I think it was actually the first one. Victor, thank you so much. We appreciate you. I'm sure the gossip mill will run it wild on college rumor camp. Yeah. Can't imagine how much information they had go through trying to figure out what was important. Yeah, I mean, quite a bit, right? So much so that, it's right now, Ann Taylor's asking for another year to go through all the evidence against them. Seems like a lot. Let's see. Can you imagine how paranoid he'd be? Yeah. Can you? For sure. All right. Other DNA wasn't looked into, or the other 400 interviews. That's not accurate. With all the FBI on this case, I have a homicide detectives in my family as well as DA. That's awesome. So the other DNA, they were turned into to the state lab. It was submitted into CODIS and came back. Not a match to anybody, including the person whose DNA was on the sheath. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when were those DNAs found, right? The first one was, or one of them that she talked about was outside in a glove that was found on like a week or so after the murders, with so many people that were out there, so many people that were visiting, whether they were news, TikTok, YouTubers, police department, officials. There were so many people out there. A week later, you find a glove, especially during wintertime. It's pretty, if you think it's uncommon in Idaho for people to be wearing gloves and one to be falling outside there, I don't know what to tell you. And the thing in the second two DNA samples, I find it interesting how vague those descriptions were. Ann Taylor came in saying that the one outside was outside, inside of a glove, and what day it was found. But the other two DNAs were just in the area where two of the bodies were, like somewhere in the area. Now, given how descriptive she was about the first one, if that DNA was found on the bodies, I'm pretty sure she would have put that there, or on the bed, or anywhere within 5 feet. So the fact that she's putting it as vague as she is tells me that that's as close as she can describe without lying, right? 'Cause she can't say it was within arm's reach, or it was within reaching, any reaching distance, any of those type of things. All right, does that make sense to you, Blue? Like, does that the fact that those they're not there?
Yeah, I get it.
And then the second part of that was the 400 interviews. What she had said is that there are still 400 interviews that they have to go and talk to. 400 witnesses. Now, I have another video. We'll probably watch it next time in its entirety, but it's a video of Chief Fry talking about what happened after Bryan Kohberger's arrest. And he states in this video that after Bryan Kohberger's name was released and his arrest had occurred, they had over 400 calls come in with information about Bryan Kohberger and his past to assist with the case. So immediately people were coming in talking about how, some red flags about this guy. So it wasn't just, like out of the blue. These were immediately. All right. So yeah, the interviews that they have also, that's interviews that Ann Taylor hasn't done, not interviews that law enforcement hasn't done. That's the other aspect, because she had put on, I'm assuming it's female, or the other 100 interviews. DNA wasn't looked into, or the 400 interviews. No, Ann Taylor hasn't gotten to the 400 interviews, and those that they have gotten to won't talk to them. Apparently, they're closing the door on them. I don't know what can happen. When DM heard voices, BK is driving. That is not accurate at all. So they downloaded DM's phone, and they were able to determine the time in which she woke up. Right, that was one of the determining factors in which, when the crime had taken place, you had, the information from the phones. If they were asleep and they heard noises and they woke up and they turned the light on their phone, that's going to activate their phone. There's going to be a record of that on the cell phone, right? And the probable cause affidavit says, that was after 4 a.m. And now I know you're saying that, he or she heard at 4 a.m. and that, he's driving around at 4:05, but there's the approximation aspect of that. Now, if we go back to what they initially said, and I'm glad that we had watched this, they said that at 1:45 a.m., that's when Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana arrived. But they say it approximately. They don't give the exact time. The reason being is, a couple of things like I mentioned before. You want to keep things close to the vest. And the second thing is, or because of that, that's why you do it. But you put them all together at the one time. It's confusing. I wish they would have done it better. I agree with you, but they can't put direct information, because if they're off by any little bit, let's just say they put on there that it was 1:45 or at 4:05 a.m. On the dot, and they go and watch, the video, and the time is off on whatever video that they're watching, that can throw a wrench in the case. So you have to use approximations. That's kind of why you don't use identifiers when it comes to like clothes or jewelry or any of those type of things, right? Because if you arrest somebody, or if a police officer arrests someone and they have what appears to be a Louis Vuitton handbag, right? You put into inventory that they had a Louis Vuitton handbag. Then if, once they get released, and let's just say that Louis Vuitton was fake, and they come back saying, hey, I had a real one. You even put it on your evidence receipt that it was a real one. Well, now you put yourself in a little bit of a pickle. So that's why a lot of things are used with approximation and things like that. I get what you're saying. 4 a.m. she was waking up and whatnot. But we know that at 4:12 is when the, that Xana puts her phone off of TikTok. And we know that at 4:05 that the white Elantra is passing by. So it's approximations. I get it. When it comes down to court, they're going to have exact times, or more exact times. I think that would be a question. Blue, how would you feel about that question? 4:05 is when he's driving around, and they say in here that at approximately 4 o'clock, Dylan is awake and hearing noises.
So 4 o'clock he's driving around and she heard noises at 4?
Well, the probable cause affidavit says at approximately 4 a.m. that Dylan wakes up to what she thinks she hears is Kaylee playing with her dog.
Okay. Yeah.
And we know because of the Linda Lane footage that he's driving around at 4:05. We also know that because of the probable cause affidavit that he turns in there at 4:04. So we also know though that he's driving off at 4:19, and that the probable cause affidavit says that the window was to 4:25, that they had seen him driving through there or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inaccuracies when it comes to the time, but like I said, there's the approximation that's put on there. When it comes down to court, it's probably going to be put, closer, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. But it's a good comment, Mr. My Rastafa. I hope I said that correctly. That's a good point that you made. Let's see.
Rastafa.
So, welcome from Taiwan. We appreciate you.
Coming in Taiwan. Yeah, man, I gotta complain because my Taiwanese made fishing lure broke, so I need to do some better work out there.
How do you become a member? You hit the join button up at the top there. If it's not there, if you're using Apple, I think you have to go to the web browser and click on the web browser, YouTube, not the YouTube app. Go to our channel and it'll say join, and that's where you can hit it there. All right. If you have questions, please put the star next to it. That was a good one. I'm not gonna lie. I don't really ever get one where I can't. What's the word I'm using? Explain it to the fullest. And that one is one I couldn't come up with. Not so much I couldn't come up with the answer. It's that it's a freaking poorly written probable cause affidavit. Me and Blue have complained about that since it came out. And, you know, they're going to have some pretty strong evidence. That's not something that we haven't said. Is that correct, Blue?
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of it's, you know, at that time they still guesstimate until they get all the evidence in. Once all the evidence is in, they have better ideas of exactly the times.
Right. I mean, yeah, but I mean, they and you're right, you know, to a certain extent. I think that part of this probable cause, and I think one of the, well, let me just rephrase. I'm like kind of rambling around. I think one of the reasons why the probable cause affidavit is poorly written is because it was pretty much copied and pasted from different parts of different reports that they had done. Right. It's not a completely new report. I mean, you have freaking 19 pages. So I'm not surprised. I'll be honest with you. These are things that, you know, I may or may not have done as well when I was, you know, in law enforcement.
I think it's like a standard precaution in a lot of fields, like even in the medical field. If when you pull up to, like, say you're EMT or paramedic, you have a standard form, standard questions, and to write out every single of those standard questions is like, no, I got a pre-printed form and I just go off my checklist. You know, the quickest list you can do. So I think that's what they have, you know.
Right, and they probably did. I mean, what I think they honestly did, like I said, I may have done it in my career, and I know a lot of people that have, is the copy and paste. You know, they go through and get different parts, and then, you know, go back and we'll edit some of it out so that way it doesn't seem like you're talking in first person or in present time, right? Like, for instance, if your report says, you know, yesterday I did this, well, if you're redoing it, it's no longer yesterday isn't that date. You have to change it from yesterday to, you know, that date. So I think that probably played a lot into why this probable cause affidavit is so poorly written. I mean, it took us a while to read it. You know, it took us a couple of times to read it to really understand what all the evidence, not so much meant, but what they were trying to say. Like, for instance, there's parts where they talk about, you know, him driving around in this big old loop, but they don't explain why that's important. You know, they just say that he did it. And I think that if they would have explained it a little bit better and explained the evidence, and if they would have put it in chronological order, I think it would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's true, though. It was in different orders. I just threw us off because we had to go. This was supposed to be before that.
Yeah, you got to jump in and do all this crap. Let's see. I saw another question. Why does a PC state suspect vehicle 1? In my opinion, anytime, it depends on the officer. Right. I've seen officers do that, whether or not there's one vehicle or two vehicles or three. It's just identifying the vehicle. And that's basically it. You know, I understand why, you know, some people would assume that it would say just, you know, suspect vehicle was seen this way, that way. Why put the 1 there? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to go look at his previous reports and see if that was something that was a commonality. Kind of like in Pennsylvania, where they say, you know, the body cam, they didn't have one when he was arrested. Well, Albrightsville, Pennsylvania Police Department, they don't have body cams there. So it's not something that was uncommon. Right? I had a lot of people tell me, oh, they had body cam footage of Kaylee and the loud noise complaints. Surely they would have it of him being arrested. I don't disagree with you. However, he wasn't arrested in Moscow. He was arrested in Pennsylvania, where they didn't have body cams. And we found the New York Post where they found that out. What were you going to say, Blue?
I was going to say, I think on the suspect vehicle 1, I think there could be also like just an acronym, like they probably could have had suspect vehicle 2 or possibly suspect vehicle 2, and it could have been the DoorDash driver's car, like it just varies on the way they document their stuff.
That's true. That's true. They could have been, you're absolutely right. It could have been very early on when they identified it as suspect vehicle 1. And then it goes back to the copy and paste component and when they put it like that, which kind of wraps itself up. All right. So why no body cam of either? Very suspicious to me. No body cam of either of what? There's no body cam of his arrest because they don't have body cams. Like, it's not uncommon. I understand that might be suspicious in Los Angeles or Dallas or San Antonio or one of these metropolitan areas, but in a small, woodsy town in the mountains of the Poconos, not so much. I mean, those things are usually typically paid by either taxpayers and or grants. Those grants are typically given to the bigger departments, and you usually don't have very many taxpayers if the community is small. So, funding becomes an issue. So not every officer ends up with one. Now, who was out there? You had the police department from the local area, and you had the FBI. Now, I've never seen an FBI body cam. Have you, Blue?
Not that I know. I'm pretty sure they have something to document. And I'm pretty sure the police cars might have had a camera, but I don't think they have to release it.
Yeah.
Unless the defense requested.
Yeah. Let's continue this.
Agencies that are involved in this task force include the Idaho County Sheriff's Office, the Idaho State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. As we continue our investigation, we have learned that Ethan and Xana were at a party on campus, and Madison and Kaylee were at a downtown bar. They arrived home sometime after 1:45. If anyone in our community or across our nation has any information about these times or the victim's whereabouts, please call our tip line at 208-883-7180. The facts of the case that we know right now. We know that these homicides occurred in the early morning hours of Sunday, November 13th. Around noon, Moscow officers received a call of an unconscious person. Officers discovered the bodies of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves inside the residence on King Road. The four were stabbed with a knife, but no weapon has been located at this time. There was no sign of forced entry into the residence. Investigators are continuing to collect evidence at the scene. Investigators are working to develop a timeline to relevant events. Autopsies are taking place today on all the victims so we can continue to gather evidence and solve the crime. Investigators are working to follow up on all leads and to identify a person of interest. Based on details at the scene, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims. We do not have a suspect at this time. And
Bryan Kohberger wasn't arrested in Moscow. He was arrested in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. So, University of Idaho, they're talking about their police officers.
And that individual is still out there. We cannot say that there's no threat to the community. And as we have stated, please stay vigilant, report any suspicious activity, and be aware of your surroundings at all times.
So he said, we cannot say that there is no threat to the community. So whatever thoughts they were having beforehand completely have been cleared or exhausted, and I think that this was an effort of protecting, I'm reading the damn chats, no protecting. I think this was, they had cleared the boyfriend, Jack Decor. I think the gag is to protect witnesses, right? The gag order is to protect the integrity of the case and to make sure that he doesn't get an unfair jury. Oh, no problem, just Amber. No problem. I wasn't trying to pull you out. I just had said that just right before you probably got there.
What we do know, or what we don't know, excuse me, the identity and location of the suspect, the location of the knife or any clothing that was worn by the suspect. Currently, we have 25 plus investigators working this case, as well as assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Idaho State Police. We're reviewing video that has been collected, but we are asking citizens to contact us with any information you may have that will help in this investigation. Once again, we're asking anyone with a tip to call the tip line at 208-883-7180. At this time, I would like to introduce the University of Idaho President, Scott Green.
Thank you, Chief Fry. I'm Scott Green, President of the University of Idaho, and with me is Tori Lawrence. He's our provost, and Blaine Eccles, our dean of students, will be available for questions after all of the statements are made. The crime, to us, this crime and the loss of these young lives is just simply beyond comprehension. While our small community is certainly not immune to such things, it's not a situation our close-knit campus is used to dealing with. First, my deepest condolences to the families.
I'm going to fast forward through this guy's part and the next guy. They don't really talk much about, well, he's not talking much about the case. He's just talking about the school.
Thank you.
I'd like to have Colonel Kedrick Wills come to the podium, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kedrick Wills. I serve as the director of the Idaho State Police. And as we have this discussion today, I'd like to express my appreciation for your attendance here because it's important, vitally important, that we get the information that we have out to the public.
I want to answer some of these real quick. Janice comes in saying, the gag, didn't they take 2 police officers off the re-sticker case? I read they took off the case. Now, I think what you're trying to say was that there was 2 officers that were involved in this sticker gate thing. Yeah, there was. But those officers really didn't have anything to do with this case. I think they were one of the first responding officers to the scene. I think that was about it. It was clearly taken over by detectives. You know, their involvement, I think, was, like I said, responding. And then I think they helped with tip lines and witnesses. It was the FBI that conducted the cast evidence. It was the FBI that finished the IGG and pointed to Bryan Kohberger. It was the FBI that picked up Bryan Kohberger's dad's trash out of Bryan Kohberger's family's trash bin. And it was the FBI who ended up, basically serving Bryan Kohberger on a platter to the Idaho prosecutor and state and police there. Yeah, I know that there may be some things that people question from the Idaho State Police, but you have to ask yourself, what is the involvement of those officers that have these questions? Were they really directly involved or not? And to be frank, those Idaho State Police officers really don't. I think one of them, Tolman, was at an autopsy. I've seen a lot of law enforcement officers at many autopsies, especially if they're younger and newer, haven't been there for more than a few years, and they haven't been to one because there hasn't been a homicide in so long, right? And I can see them sending an officer who hasn't been there, a detective, to go and watch. I've seen it happen multiple times. Now, it'd be different if the person that was in question was the person conducting the autopsy. Now, if the person conducting the autopsy had some sort of shady past or history, then I think at that point is when you would need to be concerned. But when it comes to these guys, you have to ask yourself, what is it that they could have done in the case with their limited amount of, their limited amount of involvement in the case. They were the first responders. A lot of people say, well, that gives them the opportunity to plant the sheath and or the knife or the DNA. They would have been just wandering around with Bryan Kohberger's DNA with them to wipe it on the sheath just in case. I mean, law enforcement was out there for 4 days and they couldn't get Bryan Kohberger's DNA. If Bryan Kohberger is innocent, as many people say he is, then the fact that he was wearing gloves and cleaning baskets and wiping things down was not something that happened because of the murders. Thus, it probably didn't happen when the murders happened. It was probably something that was happening before the murders, if he's innocent, that is. Which means what did he touch that he didn't have gloves on, that was accessible to everybody else, that he didn't wipe down and clean, that somehow found its way on the sheath of a person who somehow just so happens to drive the same vehicle as his, also without a front license plate, who's also out and about the same time that he is, and commits this crime at the same time that he has his phone off. I mean, the chances of all those things happening have to be astronomical. Astronomical. In fact, I think that when they tested his DNA, I think he came back 5 point something octillion, chances it was him or somebody else. I think those chances are better than the other stuff happening all at the same time. What do you think, Blue?
Yeah, that's too many coincidences that somebody else would be, driving around that time, that the DNA matched to him, and you could say, well, if the DNA matched to him, it could have been somebody in his family, and they probably did look into the record to see where everybody else was. And he was the only one in the proximity.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing we know, right? And everybody can point at the IGG and say, oh, it was done illegal, whatever. You can pick up trash, people discard, it's 100% legal. And this is why, in that one paper where it says that even if the IGG is thrown out or whatever the case may be, the DNA falls on itself and you don't need to use that as a warrant. Well, that's because no matter what, right, that DNA pickup is legal, right? And nothing anybody can do about that. Now, just that DNA pickup alone points to the person being the son of Michael Kohberger, which to anybody's knowledge and everybody's knowledge is Bryan Kohberger is the only son of Michael Kohberger. So just that alone would give you the warrants for his phone pings, would give you the warrants for his locations, would give you a warrant for his DNA on his cheek, the whole 9 yards, which is why the IGG argument is futile, which is why, everything in this case just kind of seems to be going in a big circle. Like with the grand jury argument, the prosecution and the judge said, even if you take this to grand jury or to Idaho State Supreme Court and you win, the only thing that the defense has to do is file this certain thing. I can't remember what he called it. And you're back at square one. You're back at square one. And so you just want to do a full circle. And the only thing that's going to happen is just waste time. And as we can see, it kind of seems like a pattern here of wasting time.
Pretty much what they want to do is just waste time to push the trial further and further back.
I don't know. I mean, that's what I see. I connect dots, I connect patterns, and those are the dots and those are the patterns.
And I think one reason why they're trying to do that is, I guess their theory is that they push it back far enough, people will forget. People will forget the highlights of the case.
Oh, dude, people forget it in short term. I mean, when somebody says that he was framed, or somebody says, "Oh man, Bryan Kohberger could have shook in the hands of somebody, and that person could have touched the doorknob, and that person could have, then came in contact with the real killer," and they don't think about or they forget about the fact that that person also had a car similar to his, and that person also was the same build and same height. Now, that person also was out and about during that spoiled crazy hour of like 3 to 5 in the morning in a Idaho town where I don't think it's necessarily a mountain town, where it's an icy town. It's cold. It's icy out there. Mm-hmm. And late at night, things close down earlier than normal sometimes. Well, maybe not there. It's a college town, so I think they were open till 1 or 2 anyways. But it's an icy place, November, freezing temperatures outside. You're going to be, what are the chances? I mean, the short-term memory there is they forget about all that. They forget about also the fact that there was a receipt that was found by law enforcement for a K-bar knife that Bryan Kohberger purchased in April of 2022 that just so happened to can't be found.
Yeah. No, there's too many coincidences. I think, but I think that's why the defense is trying to push it back as far back so people can forget. They're trying to get them a trial where people don't know all the facts, and they want to re-educate them to the facts.
Yeah,
that he's innocent or not guilty, which I get, because that's what every defense lawyer should do for their client.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, her job right now is to defend him in the best ways possible, but also to save his life. And they're gonna, if they feel that going to court very quickly is something that's going to, not save his life, then yeah, they're gonna pull everything to do that.
But maybe they're pushing back. They're pushing back. Maybe they're trying to see. Maybe he wants a deal. I always said that he might give up a deal. What if they say no DP and he provides the murder weapon?
I don't think they need that. I think, and yeah, I have people ask me all the time, do you know things that we don't know? The answer is yes, I do. I know a lot of people in a lot of places, and I've talked to a lot of people. I have sources from, law enforcement in almost every state that you can think of, and including in a very close area to this. I've also talked to not just one, but several of family members of the victims, and not just for one family. And so with that being said, I do know some things. I've heard some things. I can't prove some things are true or not, but I believe in the sources in which I got them from. But with that being said, outside of all those things, which those things will come out in trial, what you have here makes it very difficult for it not to be him. Very difficult, in my opinion.
And he's right. He doesn't deserve a deal, but how many often in other cases have they done deals behind everybody's back to get the information to make sure that the conviction goes through?
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Life in prison without parole, 4 consecutive counts.
And what if that's the only deal, right? Life without parole. If you're Bryan Kohberger, or if you're a person, let's just take Bryan Kohberger out of this. If you're a person that's going to jail for the rest of their life and you're only 28 years old, I think the death penalty is an easy way out.
Oh yeah, because if he did life without parole, he still have to serve 100 years.
Right, exactly. And so, he can go through appeals and do all these things. I think that if that was the deal, life without parole, he's probably not going to take it.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't really. Now, granted, this crime is very heinous, but from what I understand is, sending people to giving people the death penalty there in Idaho isn't as common as most people would think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, let's watch this.
Crime knows no boundaries, and these murders have shaken us to our very core. You heard the university president as well as the chief of police talk about this small community, and it's a very close, tight-knit community. And our hearts break for the families that lost their loved ones, the University of Idaho, the Moscow community, and even within our entire state. Be assured, the Idaho State Police is firmly in support of the work that the Moscow Police Department is doing, and we're providing every resource that we can to make sure that this comes to a conclusion, and that the person or people that this is responsible are brought to justice. It's so important that you understand that this takes a team effort. This is teamwork with the university, with this Moscow City Police Department, the Latah County Sheriff's Office, the Idaho State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It takes everybody to be able to do this, and it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act of getting the community the information that they need to have with making sure that we provide a case that the Latah County Prosecutor's Office can go forward with. Governor Little, Idaho's governor, has assured me that the full weight of all the resources we have within our state are available to Chief Fry and to his team. Our crime lab is also involved with processing evidence, and our law enforcement throughout the region, state, and federal agencies continue to provide resources. From the Idaho State Police's perspective, we provided detectives here from this area, as well as detectives from out of the area, state police detectives, as well as patrol resources and communication assistance as well to provide for Chief Fry and his team. Following this briefing, our communications director from the Idaho State Police, Aaron Snell, if you raise your hand, Aaron, he will be the contact for all press media inquiries from here on out. He'll be working closely with Chief Fry and his team. And we have additional, like I said, additional patrol and investigation resources brought to bear here as well. We want to do everything we can to make sure that this is done correctly and that the people that are responsible for this are brought to justice. So at this time, I'm going to open it up to some questions that I'm sure you have, and we'll do the best we can to answer those for you.
Hello, Chief Ray. Thank you for having us. I'm Amanda Rowley with Crime 2 News. You mentioned that there's an indication that it's an isolated, targeted incident, and there is an individual somewhere. Can you give us a reason as to why there's that belief there is a suspect? And can you also give a little more information on the forced entry? There's no sign of forced entry, but was the door, did it seem like any of the entries were left unlocked by any means?
I'll answer the last part there just because it's at the front end of my mind. We're not 100% sure if the door was unlocked, but there was no damage to anything and the door was still open.
There was no damage to anything and the door was still open. Right. Well, let me finish.
When we got there.
When they got there, right? So the door was open when they got there. No damage, nothing like that, right? Let's look at this real quick. It says here, exclusive, Moscow police chief admitted he did not know the front door to the house where the 4 University of students were murdered was left open for hours. I'm not sure where that came from. And I think that the biggest clue here, or the biggest difference, is he said the door was left open. He didn't state which one, and if it was a sliding door or the front door. Here, they were specifying the front door, and he says he's not aware of that. I feel, and I think, and I believe, and based on the information that I've been told as well, that he did come in through the back door, the sliding glass door, and that he left it open, and that it was open the entire time, not the front door. What are your thoughts, Blue?
Yeah, I think if I still have the theory that he heard somebody yell for them to be quiet, right?
Well, no. This is referencing. Oh, you're talking about the glass door in the back?
Yeah, the glass door in the back.
All right, well, carry on. I know where you were going there. I'm sorry. Carry on.
No, that's okay. And I think he rushed out and left it open. I mean, why would you spend time to try to close it, make more noise, and then, potentially have the police come,
Right. And the thing is, too, from what I understand, and I think there's got to be some sort of evidence for this, whether there's no smudging on the back end of this, of the door, which you would indicate where somebody would have closed it. Even if they're wearing gloves, you would have seen smudging, and when other people have touched it and their oils being there. But from my understanding is, the thought is that the glass sliding door was opened once and never closed again. So he opened it, whoever did this, and walked in and then went upstairs. And when they left the same way, never touching the door. And from what I understand, it's because this person was trying to not leave DNA behind. So the less times you touch an item, the less likely you're going to leave your DNA behind.
Yeah.
I heard that, I got that, and then I look at the PCA and I see, this huge trip that Bryan Kohberger made to go all the way around, to spend an hour out of his way to get back to Pullman. I had to think, why would you do that? And then I thought, well, police are probably checking the cameras into Pullman from probably about 4:20 to about 5 o'clock, right? And, expecting that if somebody committed this crime and they lived in Pullman or had to drive through Pullman to get home or their destination, that they would have driven directly through there.
Yeah.
And since he didn't, and he went this long way around, he comes in after police would have already given up looking for White Elantras coming into Pullman. You know, if he thought about that and was willing to go to that extent, you know, leaving the back door open without touching it, things like that, tells me this is very well meticulously planned. And, you know, if he didn't leave the knife sheath there, like I've said before, I think that it'd be a bit before they find out who he was. Now, I know a lot of people say, you know, leaving the knife sheath is suspicious. You know, you would have noticed it when he left the house. BTK, you know, he had experience. He had committed multiple crimes by the time he left his gun at one of them. You know, he went in, the gun was a big part of the crime, and he left without it. He went back, found it, got it before anybody, you know, came and noticed, but he had left the scene completely and had to go back. So, you know, I get it. You know, people say, oh, you know, how could you forget it? You know, it's a dumb mistake. It is a dumb mistake. There's a lot of mistakes that were made. Just look at the way the guy was driving on that Linda Lane footage and from the probable cause affidavit. After 4 o'clock, after that DoorDash item is received, whoever's driving that white car is driving kind of stupid. They're starting to make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you have a potential murder weapon in your car, you don't want to be driving like a maniac and get pulled over by the DWI team. You know, even though by that time they'll probably be home, but
yeah. And the other thing is too, like, if he was so meticulously like planning this, right? He planned this down to a T. You know, why are we so surprised that he couldn't have prepared his car, his vehicle, to limit the amount of DNA exposure or blood exposure it could have had? And he could have taken off his clothing if he wore a protective gear. There's a case, I think it's called Chris Porco. He drove 3 hours to take the life of his parents. He stood over his dad and struck him in the head with an axe, taking his life. Did the same to his mom. However, she didn't die. Now, blood splattered everywhere. Everywhere. There was no evidence of anybody changing or taking a shower or any of those things. No forced entry. And he drove back 3 hours back to his college dorm. They didn't find any blood in his Jeep. Now, the reason why they believe that he ended up being, the reason why they believe that there wasn't DNA of blood or any of those things from his parents inside his Jeep was because he worked in a veterinarian office, and they did surgeries on animals, and he was part of their team where he would wear protective gear for surgery to eliminate getting blood and things of that nature on his person. He used one of those. Bryan Kohberger is trained on how to not leave your DNA behind at a scene and how not to take a scene with you. It's in forensics. You know, he took those classes up into sales. We've looked at the course study that he had to take. It's in there. It's all there. It's public record for you to go check. We put videos on it, so if you haven't seen it, just go scroll through back. You know, if he was wearing some sort of protective gear or coveralls that were easily able to take off, and he had prepared his vehicle beforehand because he knew he was going to commit this crime, and we see how much planning he went into after the crime, right, to drive around in the manner that he did and things like that. Why are we surprised that 7 weeks later there's no DNA in the car? Yet some people are easily to believe that Dylan and Bethany cleaned an entire house in 8 hours. You know what I mean, Blue?
Yeah, I get it.
So, yeah, just throwing that out there. Food for thought.
And my first question,
Yeah.
if you'd like me to read.
No, I think I haven't. In these cases, we take the totality of the things that we see, and they're very dynamic, right? And they're very big, and there's a lot of information, and we try to take that information, and some of it we can't share with you, correct? But we try to take that information, we try to make the best educated decision we can. We review that as a team with our detectives, along with our prosecutors, along with the university, and we try to make that best decision on that. So we, at that time, believed that there was no a threat, and our goal is to provide safety for this community. That's why we're bringing in the resources we're bringing. We want it close to this, and we want to do everything we can to let the people in our community know that we care. We want them to feel safe. We want them to be safe, and we're going to do everything we can to do that.
And if I could add one more question. You asked for videos or anything from the community to help put together that timeline. We obtained a copy of Twitch video, and family members of the Goncalves family were able to identify Maddie and Kaylee in those videos at a food truck ordering food. Is the police department, our investigators, aware of that video, and has it helped put together that timeline?
We are aware of that video, and it has helped. It gives us a time and space where we know that two of our victims were, and that helps us a ton, and we'll continue to follow up all leads that we can and continue to gather those.
Any indication of a party at the home that night?
This will be the last one. Okay, I understand. Not that we know of, not at the home. We know that the other, let me get the names exactly right here. We know that Xana and Ethan were at a different party on campus. But that timeline will still help us if other people know about that.
Thank you.
Chief Wright, John Webb with KHQ. On September 12th, there was a vandal alert that was sent out about a potential stabbing threat on Paradise Path. Does this have any connection with what we've seen so far?
Not that we know of it, but we're following up every lead. Every piece of information we get, we are following up to ensure that nothing has gone unturned. We want.
Hey, Blue, don't you think that what he just said about a potential stabbing that had occurred and investigated, don't you think that person would be a better fall guy than Bryan Kohberger?
Yeah, because of the crime that he committed.
Right. Like, and this just goes to say that even early on, there were other people that probably would have fit the crime better if you just looked at it from, records. Bryan Kohberger didn't have one. He was a PhD student in criminology. You look at this situation where there's a guy that was threatening people with a knife. You had another guy, a couple of days after the murders, he or a couple of weeks or a week or so, he attempted to stab his wife, and he stabbed himself. He ended up getting arrested. He had cuts on his arms and things like that. And he lived about 4 or 5 blocks away from where the 1122 King Road residence was. He's a better fall guy, in my opinion. And you also have, Brent Kopacka, who's taken out by SWAT. Now, there's a big question mark there, whether or not SWAT did the right thing, if it was legal, not legal, this, that. But let's just say if it wasn't and they did it wrong, because obviously law enforcement does everything wrong, right? We can't get out of that. Wouldn't you think that you would pin the Moscow case on that one guy? That way, if whatever you did do wrong isn't, shadowing over, is getting shadowed by that instead. You know what I'm saying? It's just what I'm thinking.
If you're trying to commit something where you throw the blame on if you're trying to frame somebody, that would be more the ideal person. But they probably had a strong alibi.
Okay.
If you would have to. But all right, I gotta get going.
All right, see you later, Big Blue.
Y'all take care, guys.
The thing for me then, and I get what you're saying there, maybe they had a strong alibi. They know where they were. And Bryan Kohberger, he didn't have an alibi. How does Moscow Police Department know that Bryan Kohberger was just driving around that night with his phone off? How do they come up with that information to say he doesn't have an alibi to prove that it was him? It doesn't make sense. Now, if there's DNA, his DNA is on the sheath and it was planted there, it had to be planted pretty early on in the investigation, don't you think? Because Idaho State Lab, Idaho State Forensics, there's pictures of them, are the ones that collected that piece of evidence and sent it to Boise. So it wasn't in Moscow. And they did they're the ones that found the DNA profile and created the STR profile, which was then sent to Othram so that they could do a IgG, genetic tree to try to figure out a potential person of interest. And as they were doing that at the same time, they were doing their investigations. Once their investigation was exhausted, the FBI was then, because of their policy, was then able to get involved, and they concluded the IgG. No. Hold on. Oh man, I jumped up. I probably missed a bunch of questions. Put some stars if you have questions on there. Let me continue this.
Want to have the individual identified, who is the suspect of this eventually. So we are literally looking into every aspect of everything.
You guys have said repeatedly that there's no threat to the public, but we don't know who the suspect is. We don't know where he's at. How is there no threat to the public at this?
All right, hold on. Somebody said something about his internship. How do you know he applied and refused to answer if he got the internship? Well, we know that he applied, I would assume twice. You know, there was a deal there in the spring, in April, which just so happened to be the time that he purchased the K-bar knife. You know, coincidence there. You know, there was a leaked email that it was between Chief Jenkins of Pullman. You know, that's the other thing, right? You know, where did they get Bryan Kohberger as a suspect? Everybody says, oh, you know, they got his name from when he applied. He didn't apply for Moscow. He applied for Pullman Police Department. So there's another big wrench into that theory. Well, anyways, you know, he applied in April, and there was this whole email thing that was sent out where he said, you know, it was a pleasure meeting with you. And then, you know, Gary said back, it's a pleasure meeting with you too, blah, 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 right? Then we find out from the probable cause affidavit that he applied again in the fall. So he applied in the spring, and then he applied in the fall, where he submitted an essay, and you know, they've come out and said that he was not given the position in the fall either. So he had applied twice, and 2 times was denied. And again, it was for Pullman Police Department, not Moscow.
Well, that's kind of an unknown. Like I said, we took the information that we had at the time, but we do need to be aware. The individual is still out there, right? We need to be vigilant. We need to watch out for our neighbors. We're a community policing community. We've said that for years, and it's a community that watches out for each other. We need to continue to do that until we can close this off and make an arrest.
Why has there been such limited information over the past couple of days? I mean, we're almost 4 days into this. Why has it been so limited?
Yeah, it's a difficult. We have a lot of information coming in, and you know, we have tried to push out some information through press releases. The reality is, I probably should have been standing here a day or so ago, but I'm here now. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to continue to give you the information we can. We care about this community. I care about this community. I've worked here for 27 years. I want this community to be the safest community around. So
the mayor's called it a crime of passion. Is there any indication that that's true?
We're looking into every aspect of this. I'm not going to stipulate whether it's one thing or another. We're going to continue to investigate, and through evidence we'll get that. So
one last question, if I could, Chief. Have we looked at any boyfriends or any ex-boyfriends, any spouses as a potential suspect?
I will tell you, we are looking at everyone. Every tip we get, every lead we get, there's no one that we're not going to talk to. There's no one we're not going to interview. There's no one that we're not going to look into. And we're going to do our due diligence. We're going to make sure that nothing goes unturned, and that we do everything we can with the assistance of all the resources we have to get a final answer.
Thanks, Chief.
So there were, sorry, I'm Matt Burley with this Books Review. Hi. So there were other roommates who lived at that residence. Were the roommates home at the time of the attack?
There was other people home at that time, but we are not just focusing just on them. We're focusing on everybody that may be coming and going from that residence.
So since they were home, was it a hostage situation?
No, it was not.
And then they didn't call it into police, so were they injured?
They were not injured, but like I said, we're still following up with everybody that could have been in that area.
And how can you say it's a targeted attack if you don't have a suspect?
Like I said, we take the totality of the situation. We try to make the best bit of information we can with everything that comes in, and then we make our decision off of that. So at this time, I'm not going to expand upon that. But like I've said, we do have a suspect out somewhere, and we are looking for that individual to solve this.
Oh man, let me go back real quick.
Seen on it. Bit of information we can with everything that comes in.
Just want to clarify something you said earlier.
He said that there's a suspect out there and they're trying to figure out who it is, for the most part. Doesn't necessarily say that they know who the suspect is, just that there's somebody out there. It's kind of like in the Richard Allen case where, you know, the Indiana State Police came out and said, you know, we know who you are. We're trying to figure this out. You know, just you're in the area, whole 9 yards. You might be in this room watching. All these things that indicated that they wanted to, or they were hoping to get across to the person that committed the crimes, is that they may have made a mistake. Make them nervous. Make them, go back to the scene. Make them do something that gives away who they were. These are all tactics that are done in efforts to make a person nervous and to make a mistake.
Over the past couple of days, the information that we've been getting is there's not a threat to the public. And earlier I heard you say you can't be sure that there is no threat. I just wanted to clarify what your stance is on that at this time.
So we still believe it's a targeted attack, but the reality is there's still a person out there who committed 4 horrible crimes. So I think we got to go back to there is a threat out there still, possibly. We don't know. We don't believe it's going to be to anybody else, but we all have to be aware of our surroundings and make sure that we're watching out for each other.
Okay, and then one other follow-up. I know you said when the call came in, it was for an unconscious person, and also that was a stabbing. It seems, just from an outside perspective looking in, like that would be not the first thing a person calling in would think.
You're right. But the report that we got was that it was an unconscious individual. It wasn't until our officers arrived on scene, went in to do caregiving check on the individual who was unconscious, that we found the scene that we found.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Heather Roberts with ABC News. Just to follow up on what she asked. So the other 2 roommates were there at the time of the attack?
All the information that we have from our investigation is that yes, they were.
Okay, but they were unhurt.
That is correct.
So is there any explanation as to why it took so long then for someone to call 911? You have surviving witnesses to an incident at 3 or 4 in the morning, and the 911 call didn't come until noon?
I don't think I ever said that they were witnesses. I said they were there. So, we don't know why that call came in at noon and not in the middle of the night. Would have we loved for that to have happened? Yes, but that's not how it took place. So that's why we're investigating everything still to try to pull all the pieces together.
Were they one of the people, were they the 911 caller?
At this point in time, I'm not going to divulge who our 911 caller is, just because I want to keep the integrity of the investigation at this point, okay?
Okay, and last question, are you able to tell whether the same weapon was used on all 4 victims?
That's why we're having the autopsies done. The autopsy will confirm that and hopefully collect some evidence for us, even from those. That's why you do the autopsies, is to try to be thorough and try to gather more. So we'll leave that would probably be something that would come out later.
Excuse me, Derek Shug, Fox News Digital. Was there anything missing in the home, or were the purses still there? Any robbery attempt, anything like that?
Nothing that we have identified. And I'm going to take about 2 more questions, all right?
Hi, I'm Tim with the Daily Evergreen. I was just wondering, were the 2 other individuals present at the home when police responded at noon?
Yes.
Chief, if you don't mind elaborating a bit more on those 2 people. Was it 2 people? What have those people shared about the circumstances of that night, what they saw or didn't see?
Well, I'm not going to go into what they shared that night. Obviously, that's part of our investigation. That's part of the information that we're trying to build our complete story with. So as far as that goes, we're not going to go any further into what they know and what they don't know.
Well, he didn't say they slept through it. He says that he's not going to talk about what information they shared about that night. I don't know. I thought he said they slept through it. Everybody keeps telling me that Chief Fry said they slept through it. Maybe he did. I didn't read it or I didn't see it. But in these 2 press conferences thus far, I haven't heard him say they slept through it. Oh, man. 1 second. I pulled down all my freaking... There it is.
Didn't see?
Well, I'm not going to go into what they shared that night. Obviously, that's part of our investigation. That's part of the information that we're trying to build our complete story with. So as far as that goes, we're not going to go any further into what they know and what they don't know.
How many were there?
We believe 2.
Chief, have you looked into the social media accounts of all the different victims, and we understand that one may have had an account linked to her
Instagram account. Have you looked into those accounts? Have you seen any sort of threats made to any of the individuals?
So we are looking at all resources. You know, we got, like I said, the Federal Bureau of Investigation helping us. We got our detectives, our forensic detectives looking into that. We're trying to pull this whole picture. We're looking at everything that we can look at, social media, etc. So to answer your question, yes, we are.
Were the victims all found in one part of the house?
I'm not going to divulge that either. That's part of our investigation. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close this off. But if you'd like to, if you have any questions for the university, we'll open that up at this point in time.
All right, this is questions for the university. Drunk turkey florals. All right, let's see. Let me pull this off the screen real quick. Yeah, like I said, I didn't hear him say they slept through it. Maybe they did in another press conference. I could be very wrong about that. If you guys have seen that press conference or know where that one is at, share it to me at drunkturkeyshow at gmail.com. I'd appreciate it. So, all right, let me see. Before we get into this, let me go back up. I started a few things. Let me go back up here and go through some of these comments. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there's a link in the description. And it's also in the live chat. That'll get you to the membership. I forgot about that. Why do you think they will? When do you think they will release the 911 call before trial? No, it's gone this long already. I highly doubt that they will. Why no mention of tire marks outside? Well, there's no mention at this point, right? We don't know that yet. At the time of the probable cause affidavit, Bryan Kohberger, when it was created, it was before his arrest. So it was before police had possession of his white Elantra to match up any tire marks. So there could be that there now. You know, they could have gone out there and matched them up and have found tire marks matching his in that location. So quite possible. But you know, just because we don't know about it doesn't mean it didn't happen. You know, we don't know about it because when it would have happened after his arrest, you know, after the probable cause affidavit was written. Does Brian's family get police protection now or at trial? Don't think so. The whole knife sheath thing makes this case, like, at what point did he not know he have it? I think he would have known before leaving the house. Oh, yeah. Like I was saying, BTK left a gun at a house once, and he didn't realize it until later and had to go back and retrieve it. Bryan Kohberger went back at 9 a.m. So DM statement and BF statement are different. I haven't seen their statements to say. I think we've only seen about 4 sentences of what Dylan had said about that night. You know, she said that she heard, you know, what Kaylee thought, or what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog. You know, somebody say, I think someone's here, some whimpering. Somebody say, I'm here to help you. And she saw somebody walk by with the same build as Bryan Kohberger with a mask on that just covered his nose and mouth and had his bushy eyebrows out. I mean, her statement is a lot larger than that. And when it comes to Dylan Mortenson, we haven't even seen anything out of her statement. You know, there's been speculation that there's supposedly a naked person outside. Well, even if that's true, how does that exclude Kohberger? Unless the naked person they saw outside was female. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't exclude him. It doesn't exonerate him. It could easily have been him that was naked outside. I mean, one of the things that I think happened in this case is that he wore coveralls. Reason being is they took a tag and receipt for coveralls as evidence. You only take those things in as evidence if you think they're part of the crime. And so if he took something like that off, it literally takes about 30 seconds to remove those things. You know, the footprint that was left, the one that we know about. Now, everybody thinks that that's the only footprint that was there. It's the only one that we know about. There could have been many others in that house. But the only one that we know about is Vans. It has a Vans print on the sole. Vans sells some slip-on shoes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it only takes me like 5 seconds to slip off some shoes and slip on some other ones that are possibly slip-on shoes as well. You know, he was running a mile in 6 minutes. Yeah, imagine what a person can do in the same amount of time it takes them to run a mile, or maybe 2. It's a lot of time, y'all. So let's see. Do we think BK's family will be at his trial? I don't know. Maybe. If they're not, I think that kind of tells you a little bit of maybe perhaps, you know, their confidence in him. Yeah, law enforcement can't get it right where the sheath was found. That's not true. You know, like I said in the probable cause affidavit, they don't have to put things like perfectly there. It's just enough for the arrest. And so where it's saying that it was, you know, next to the body, you know, it really doesn't matter. It was photographed. It's been documented by forensics. It's been pictured before the body was moved, any of those things. So all these little things that people see and are questioning, you know, like for instance, the 27-mile thing on his tracking, you know, in triangulation, where they said, oh yeah, 12 times he was by the house. They used triangulation. He could have been at the mall down the street. Yeah, very well true. That's true. But they also got a warrant for his GPS locations. And if his phone was connected to the tower, I assume it was on. And if it was on, I assume those apps that are taking where his locations were tracking where he was. And so they're going to have it down to a very accurate foot of where he was and how long he was there. You know, so all these things that people are saying, it's, you know, these little question marks. Oh, he said this way or that way. The evidence is going to be there. We'll see it in court one way or the other. What's my view on Kohberger? I think he did it. I ain't going to say he's guilty. I'm not going to say that. Let me put the banner up. I'm not going to say that I think that he should be hung, tried, you know, put to death, or given the life sentence. I don't know on the evidence there. I think it's pretty strong and apparent that he did commit this crime, and it's very unlikely that he didn't. But until I see all the trial stuff, I'm not going to say 100% one way or the other. But what's my view? I think he did it. That's my opinion. Law enforcement states we have an individual. We are still seeking all the evidence. Yeah. A lot of law enforcement say a lot of things to try to get guys to mess up. Oh, you're welcome, my man. Thanks for the live. It's great after a long day at work. Thank you. Let's see. Now they're saying all the doors were locked. I don't know where that came from. Will the public find out what happened if BK were to take a plea deal, assuming he's a part? No, I don't think so. I mean, I haven't followed true crime long enough for a case to actually go to trial and be completed. You know, we started talking about true crime when Richard Allen was arrested. And so since then, Bryan Kohberger and case occurred and his arrest has happened, but neither of them have gone to trial. And neither of them have pled. So I don't know what happens. I do know that a lot of folks were following the Chris Watts case. In the Chris Watts case, he took a plea. I don't know how much of the information of the evidence was released afterwards. I haven't looked into it, but that should give you an idea of how much information will be released if Bryan Kohberger were to take a plea deal. The state doesn't have anyone else besides BK. According to PC, BK was driving around when murders took place. State slam. Yeah, but like, when did they find out that he was driving around by himself? Like, just because he was driving around by himself, I mean, that's part of what happened, my man. He was driving around. I mean, his own alibi puts him out there, you know, puts him out there in his car and by himself. He's not saying he was with anybody else. So if people think that he committed this crime and that they think that he may have had a hand in it, but didn't commit it, but didn't commit it. Well, he said his own admission is he was by himself, alone, by himself. When did they find out about that? Because they would have had to have put Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath. When would they have known that he was going to be driving around by himself and put the DNA on the sheath at the same time? It's impossible, my man. I mean, they would have, like, the crime would have happened at 4:20 in the morning is when he takes off. They have 8 hours between that time and the time 911 is called and officers are en route, and there's, body cams there. Like you guys have said, Moscow has the body cams. We haven't seen them. That doesn't mean they're not there. Body cams are there. Police detectives, Idaho State Forensics arrive. That DNA would have had to have been on there before then. So in that 8-hour time frame, how the hell did they know Bryan Kohberger was out and with his phone off? And if they knew that then, why the hell did they wait 7 weeks to go arrest him? The stuff that they needed for the warrants weren't anything crazy. I mean, they expanded the warrant for the cell tower, right? And they showed that his phone turned off at 2:47 or wasn't connected to the tower, and that it reconnected at 4:48. Right? You have that. You have that there. You have him driving a white Elantra. At the time, it was without a front license plate. He matches the height and build, and he's taken studies and classes that would have, taught him how to prevent or elude investigation. Which apparently there was a lot of evidence there that the person who committed this crime went through great lengths to elude this investigation. That alone will give you a warrant for his phone pings. And that's when they find out he's there 12 times. They find out where he's at, and you can go pull trash DNA. And if you can't pull his, let's just say that cops were onto him earlier on, right? They knew who he was. All they had to do was go pull up his trash. And if they found his DNA on there and they matched it to the sheath, he would have been arrested within weeks. Why wait 7 weeks to do this? Right? And why go after a PhD student? Like, how is he even on the radar? He'd only been there for a few weeks, maybe 3 months. So how is he on Pullman, Washington radar? And if a murder occurs in Moscow and they need a fall guy, do you really think they're going to go look at the applications for people that applied at the neighboring city's police department to find a fall guy when they have a complete list of numerous of people that have been arrested for heinous crimes, including that one guy, like I mentioned earlier, who was a convicted murderer who attempted to stab his wife and stab himself days after the murder, that lived 4 blocks away? Those guys, you can't do that. You go for Bryan Kohberger solely because he was by himself that night. Doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, that one don't make sense. I gotta call a spade a spade. That one don't make sense. Not at all. Let's see. He entered via climbing the balcony of the 3rd floor until the spot near Maddie's room. He could get into Kaylee's sliding door, plus DM never heard anyone go up the stairs to her room. There was a lot of berries that were outside of Dylan, Kaylee's bedroom and things like that. Also, you had the back sliding glass door still open when they arrived there. You have law enforcement's probably already talked to, very early on, to Hunter Johnson, the guy that called 911, and whoever was with him. And they probably told them that the back sliding glass door was open when they went over there. And the reason being is because, when Chief Fry says it was still left open. And that would tell you that they didn't open it, then it probably was the killer that left it open. So you would assume that, he may go in and out the same location. To climb up to the 3rd floor balcony without making noise or waking somebody up, things like that, and then go through Kaylee's room, you said, where Kaylee wasn't sleeping, but Murphy was at. I find it unlikely. It's not impossible. I just find it unlikely. A person who was pinged around the house 12 times, who followed the girls on Instagram, who was in the area in the daytime and time of the murders, and whose DNA is on the sheath under a victim. Yeah, No, yeah, you're right. I mean, he also bought a knife that they can't find. That list can go on. Isn't it weird that they never compared the shoe size of BK and the latent footprint found at the scene? How do you know that they didn't? How do we know that the latent shoe print was big enough, or was enough of a print to determine the size of the foot? What if it was only a partial footprint? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions in this sentence so far, and that's one part of the question. They're only looking at the pattern, but wouldn't the shoe size be a better comparison? I think both of them would probably be a good comparison. You're probably going to look at both. And I think that they have and had. Now, just because they hadn't put that in there in the probable cause affidavit doesn't mean that they didn't do it or that's not part of the case. You know, you don't need to have that aspect of it in the probable cause affidavit to get an arrest. The car leaving and coming back makes me think he was looking for Kopaka, who, whoa, that's a big stretch. I don't even know if he was in that area or any of those things. Like I said, I mean, I don't know where you're hearing this from when it comes to Kopaka, but I'd reconsider hearing any other information from that place, because no. Kopaka was killed for a reason. Yeah, because he threatened his roommates, wasn't it? And SWAT came in, and then I know some people said he had an itchy finger. You know, the police had an itchy trigger finger and all this other stuff. And I don't know what evidence they based that off of. You know, there's a body cam footage. I haven't seen it, I'll be honest. But, you know, if there was an officer that did something illegal based off of that body cam footage that's out there, that's publicly available for anybody else to get, including law enforcement that investigate police officers, and I think there would be an investigation there. Now, appearances and when police officers arrive and when the camera turns on are all aspects of context. You don't know what occurred before that camera happened. You don't know what was said before the recording started. Right? So, like I said, looking at some things and trying to fit one piece, you know, people have short-term memory. They forget all the other aspects around it. Right? What if they have the knife and they're not telling us? I mean, at this point, I think we would have found out by now if they had the knife. They could have easily been saying that early on in the investigation and in the press conferences that they didn't have it. I don't see the advantage of denying the possession of it to the media. But yeah, they can lie to the public about that. I don't think they have, but they could have. 3 unidentified DNA. Well, I mean, it depends on where it's at. And the other thing is too, it's resources, right? You know, when the Idaho case happened, you know, crime didn't stop everywhere. You know, their lives weren't, you know, taken, you know, murderers didn't just stop killing people. Other heinous crimes just didn't put a halt on it just for this one case. You know, the FBI and Moscow Police Department, Idaho State Police Department, or Idaho State Police, they all have limited resources, and they all have other cases and other things to cover. So when you have a sheath under the body of a victim, and there is DNA inside of the button snap, right? Inside the button under the body of a victim, and it's single source DNA, so it's not mixed with anybody. So whoever put it in there, you know, it'd be hard to put something in there without mixing your own DNA. Anywho, you know, I think that one would be more important than a DNA in a glove that was found a week after the murders happened. That was outside when there was tons of people out there. You know, you can't do anything with it. All right. Even if you were to trace down this person, you know, the fact that it wasn't found until then probably says a lot. And they probably have camera or pictures from the area. All right. And let's just say they took pictures of that area they found it before it was found, after the murders happened and it wasn't there. Then that means it was left sometime afterwards. So the investigation on that is over. And like I said, they were super specific about that one piece of evidence or DNA, but very vague about the location of the other two. And that's probably because that's as close as they can get to the victims as possible without lying, right? You know, if they were within arm's reach, they were within arm's reach. Just like Ann Taylor put that the other DNA was inside a glove outside of the house. I mean, they were very specific about that. So you have to ask yourself, why aren't they specific about the other one? It's probably because it's 10 feet away on a dresser or something. And with 150 people there the night before, can you really say that that DNA was there, you know, the night of the murders? Not really. Can you say that that DNA was there before the night of the murders, the night before that? It's hard to tell. But the DNA on the sheath, it's a different question. It's a different answer. Yes, please let Kohberger rest in peace. Brian's dad mentioned Brent in one of the 2 stops in Idaho. Odd. Well, he didn't mention Brent. He mentioned a shooting that occurred at the campus in which Bryan Kohberger taught at and attended. So when the Idaho State policeman asked, "Where are you coming from?" and he says WSU, and he says, "I don't know where that's at," and this incident had just occurred in the morning, Bryan Kohberger had gotten it's not a vandal alert, it's an alert from WSU about the shooting that occurred. And an officer says, "I don't know where WSU is." You're not going to go to the most recent event that just happened that day where there was a, you know, person's life taken by SWAT. Obviously, I mean, you know, I live in San Antonio, Texas. You know, Uvalde's not too far away from where I live. Like, it doesn't mean I had anything or I know anybody that was there just because of the proximity of where I'm at. And if I bring up something about, you know, where in San Antonio I live, and I use that as an example because that made national media, you know, you can't connect those dots. Those dots don't connect just because there's a vague, you know, mentioning of them. So just because his dad brought it up doesn't mean there was anything to it. And that's what I'm trying to say. What if they had the knife and they're not telling us? I doubt it. I think I answered this one earlier. All right, man, I got like 200 other comments since I took those. Let's look through this and then I'll go through those real quick.
With a C, Mabbutt, Mabbutt.
And I'm going to ask you, how long have you been doing this for?
I've been doing it for 16 years, and I just got reelected for another 4.
So what is it that, or I guess, when did you get the call on Sunday?
I got the call just a few minutes after noon that there were 4 homicides, but I didn't go to the scene because of law enforcement doing their investigation first. So I didn't actually go to the scene until about 5 or 5:30.
Can you walk us through, like, for our viewers, kind of the process between when police show up and then you guys getting the bodies and doing their examinations?
Sure. Well, law enforcement goes through and looks for any evidence, takes videos and pictures of everything in there, and they'll start talking with people. So I don't really need to be there for that. They can't move the bodies. I mean, the bodies have to stay as they were until the coroner gets there. So that's what my job is, to look at the bodies.
As a coroner, do you guys do the autopsies and all that?
No, we some do if they're an actual medical examiner, but we have forensic pathologists and we contract with Spokane to do that.
So in your experience, what is it that you saw when you saw that?
Well, there was a lot of blood. It was a very sad scene.
A lot of blood. Don't sound like it was cleaned up to me. A lot of blood. It was a sad scene. And one thing that I know and have heard is that the scenes were pretty contained to the bedrooms, which is why they probably thought early on that the victims were asleep when they were attacked. Because from what I understand, there was no sign of anything else outside of the bedrooms. And everything was contained in there. And in there was no evidence of a cleanup. All the evidence was there, from what I understand.
For murdered college students.
You're ruling all 4 deaths homicides?
Yes.
And can you give us a manner of death?
I believe that the press release was that they were from a sharp object. So
static.
Yeah, we'll know more after the autopsies tomorrow.
And do you believe this could be
No, they're 4 homicides.
And when it comes to doing the investigation of post-autopsy, that falls under you, correct?
Yes, it's my job to determine the manner and mechanism of death.
And then I know with toxicology results, there can often be somewhat a delay. So do you have any idea how long it could take if this were relevant to get any type of results back on that?
Well, the toxicology reports, right, they usually take 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. But they might, I don't think they're going to be relevant in the actual manner or cause of death.
And do we know how long between the time of death and when police found them, approximately?
No, I don't know for sure.
Do we have like any, like, could it have been hours? Could it have been a day? Was it maybe close? Like, is there any sort of like time frame there?
Not that I'm aware of.
When you said the scene was pretty difficult, I mean, is this something you've had to deal with before in Moscow?
Since I've been coroner, there have been at least 2 other multiple homicide scenes that I've been involved in. So.
Would you say this is probably the most recent?
No, it's hard to just single it out. It's the only one I've been to where there have been 4 people at one scene. There have been the other ones have had multiple scenes.
And was anybody else injured at the analysis?
Not that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't necessarily be notified either.
I didn't know if that was like because the injury was
Oh, all right.
Were the deceased all in close proximity to each other, or were they in different rooms?
I don't know that I can discuss that.
My next question too. So. Yeah.
Will we be able to get a copy of your report?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just call.
Yes. Yep.
Do you know what the time frame for that is?
It just depends on how relevant the toxicology report is, but
Okay. So it like the 4 to 6 weeks.
it could be. Yeah.
I didn't hear anything that was inaccurate in what she was saying. It seemed pretty much standard quo. You know, a lot of folks put in a lot of things in what Chief Fry had said early on, and Maddie, I miss Matabu, can't pronounce her name, the coroner here, had stated, and I mean, I'm seeing very vague answers. And I think that what happened was some people took those vague answers and manipulated them into something else. But yeah, it's not that. Let's see. Do you understand how frustrating it is for me to have viewed evidence that I currently can't produce for you all? I am right now, but can't show you all right now. I am trying to get the pics for you. Send them to me. I'll take a look at them and see what you got. You know, I've seen and heard some things. If you got something I haven't seen or heard, it definitely needs to go out to the police department if it's something that points at somebody else, because it don't seem like they have much that points at somebody else. But if you have it, yeah, please, drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. I have receipts, as always, so I know he was there months before. Months before where? Let me know what you mean, Mikey. Let's see. What is my point? My point is that I don't know if you're talking to me or not, but if it's about me, if you can't see it, well, I don't know. Not frame regardless. Yeah, it's unlikely. No, this is completely wrong. At the presser, which was a couple of weeks later, in fact, I have it here. This is when he said that it was news to him. This was at the, let's see, when was this? I have it here. I believe this was at the Christmas parade. Yeah, right here, Christmas parade. Moscow Chief of Police and 10th Annual Christmas Parade in Idaho. And this is when he was asked about that and was told that. So this is way after the fact about the door open. So he said that the door was open at the presser, and they were referring to probably the back door. And this one, he's referred to specifically the front door, and he's saying, that's news to me. So yeah, right here. This is when it was taking place. Right here, it says right here, he could not neither confirm nor deny whether the door, in fact, was left open. He says, I don't even know the answer to that one. If I did, I'd probably comment on that. I don't know the answer, whether the door was open. And this was referencing the front door. Because somebody had said that they had spoken to somebody and they had mentioned that it was open since then. Olivia actually stated that they did everything right and even locked all the doors. What are your thoughts about this? Yeah, if you go and look at that interview, I haven't. She gets very emotional and she starts talking about, you know, they did everything right. They did this, they did that. And a lot of it is assumptions. I've talked to Christy Goncalves about this exact thing and asked her, did anybody go out? Did anybody let the dog out? Those type of things. They have no idea. None whatsoever. There was no video of them walking the dogs out or any of those things. And they have never seen any video like that. But as far as locking up and things like that, how would they know that? You know what I mean? And like I said, I've asked Christy that. They say a lot of things out of emotion, and you got to be careful when family is speaking out of emotion about things. You know, there was a case not too long ago here in San Antonio where a pregnant woman and her boyfriend, and it was very sad because this pregnant woman was supposed to give birth the next day. Their lives were taken in a drug deal gone bad. And, you know, everybody was just kind of like, I think the family was just kind of emotional about the whole thing. And there was blame going back and forth, and out of emotion, people were saying one thing about one person and another. And it ended up looking like people were trying to blame families against family, and ended up being completely different. It was a guy, it was a drug deal gone wrong. You know, these people were involved in narcotics and things like that. And, you know, just be careful what you hear when it comes from emotional family members in any case. You know, their emotional facts they don't really care. They'll, you know, they're not looking to be 100% accurate when they're speaking out of emotion. That's what I mean. They don't care about those things in that moment. It's just, you know, they're frustrated, they're stressed, they're emotional, and just getting stuff out. So that's what I think about that. I've actually, like I said, talked to Christy about that situation, about what they know, and it's not accurate. I know. If prosecution can profit that DNA evidence is sus, BK walks. If prosecution, I'm not sure what you mean. Go back and watch. You can hear Christy say it was Dylan who got her back. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I talked to Christy herself. Like we've spoken before. I've interviewed her 2 times officially. We've talked about certain aspects of the case multiple times. How did BK not trip over the step outside of DM's room? I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know how steep that step is or not. You know, just because there's a step there and it's dark doesn't necessarily mean he tripped over it. And there's a possibility that he stepped on top of it the first time that he walked through, you know, making him realize that there is a step there. Right. So just because there's not a tripping sound or something like that doesn't mean that this guy didn't do it. I mean, somebody would have had to have gone into that house and taken the lives of 3 people. I mean, are you thinking that that person, you know, was familiar with the house? So that's why they didn't, you know, hit the step. Okay. Well, if they were that familiar and they have, you know, forensic downloads of the victims and the roommates and of their boyfriends and ex-boyfriends and things like that, I'm pretty sure there'd be a little bit of evidence to show that there was some sort of a hint of an incident or an issue that would have led to something like this, right? Arguing, fighting. If it was drug related, don't you think that there would be some communication between the victims or the roommates, between them and the drug cartel or whoever they're holding drugs for, or whatever the case may be? There'd be communication there one way or another. And they downloaded their phones, right? So that includes their apps and the messages on the apps. So like these WhatsApp or or Snapchat and things like that, those things can be retrieved. I know that some of them require warrants, but they can be as long as the phone is there. Nothing ever gets deleted off the internet. So, yeah. In fact, I think I saw a case here recently where, or a situation that somebody had threatened that they were going to do something, and they did it on Snapchat, and it wasn't in America, but it was somewhere else. I think it was in Europe or something, and they ended up arresting the kid because he made a joke or something like that on Snapchat. Now, granted, it didn't happen here, but if you don't think that the government listens to what you say and do or whatnot, yeah. So if they have that technology to do those type of things and they can get the warrants for it, I mean, obviously some of those things are national security things, but when it comes to this kind of, case, they can get warrants for messages and stuff like that. There's no way there wouldn't be evidence of drug activity on there. Christy say Dylan who got her back. I don't understand what that means. He lived in the building from what? He lived in a building. Perhaps he had left for PA before they wanted to go in for arrest. That's possible. And that he tried to get out of there before they arrested him. BK could have left through the back sliding glass door. I said that that's possible. But what I also said was, from what I understand, is that it is believed, and I have good sources on this one, that he opened the door and left it open the entire time. Now, if you go back and you watch and you look at what they did to the door handle there, what they probably found was evidence that somebody had opened it, but no evidence of somebody closing it recently. Like, for instance, if you have clear oily fingerprints on the inside all across, well, that means somebody with gloves didn't close it, right? But if you have like smudges and stuff, or you have smudges and no clear fingerprints, that means somebody with gloves closed it. If you have nothing there, that means nobody touched it. And if maybe perhaps, if the last person's, fingerprints or DNA that is on there is one of the victims that passed, well, then obviously whoever opened it didn't close the sliding glass door behind them. Now, we can't say for sure. I mean, I didn't see it. I just have it on good authority. And there was another part. Plus, DM heard someone playing with Murphy on the 3rd floor. I think what they heard on the 3rd floor was somebody taking the life of someone, not necessarily playing with the dog. Here you Cat keeps on. Why do people think the public have all the information that Ellie has? I don't get it either. Have y'all ever thought that maybe BK was the one calling the noise complaints ever? That'd be interesting. Now, I think that if there was a history of somebody calling in noise complaints and it was the same person, that's all logged. You would see that pretty quickly. And then you would see he drove a white Elantra pretty quickly. And then based on those two things, you'd probably be able to go get a warrant for his phone activity and see that his phone was off pretty quick. And then you probably go pick up trash at his house. And if you couldn't pick up trash at his house because, he's wearing gloves and those things, I mean, they couldn't find his trash and his parents' trash while he was there for over a week. All right. So he was doing a good job of keeping his DNA off of things. The next step would be to go to his parents' house, pick up trash from them, and then get a familial DNA. So then you can get a warrant and then go pick up Bryan Kohberger and then check his DNA to it. So I think that it would have been real easy to arrest him if that would have been the case. I don't think he was. I agree with you, Mark, on this one. Let's see, I'll answer a few more of these and then I'm going to call it a show. Why do people think, all right, no, that's the same one. I mean, none of this case adds up. I think it adds up pretty good. I mean, you got a guy who purchased a knife that can't be found in April of 2022, around the same time that he's probably getting denied the first time for the internship at Pullman with the Pullman Police Department. He then moves cross country where he is the TA and he's getting his PhD in criminology, and immediately it's going bad. Within a month, he's on his first behavioral thing, right? He's having arguments with Professor Snyder. He's having some disturbing behavior with female PhD students to the point where other PhD students are documenting his disturbing behavior. They're not allowing him to be in rooms with females by himself. You know, all the while during this time, you know, again, he applies for the police department. He doesn't get that. You know, he's about to lose his TA job. You know, his world is crumbling around him. So he goes out and finds his house, whatever, right? And how does it add up to him? Well, there's a person. Well, how can we put it? Let's start off at one point. Bryan Kohberger decides to leave and drive around during the same time that the murders happen. You know, what are the chances that while Bryan Kohberger is driving out with his phone off, that a murder is going to happen? You know, do those chances increase or decrease when you find out that the murderer is also the same build, height, and weight as Bryan Kohberger? Right? Now, do those chances increase or decrease when you find out that that person also drives a Wide Elantra without a front license plate, regardless of where they got it from, whether it was their own or they stole it? They're driving the same car that Bryan Kohberger is. And what are the chances that that person also is carrying Bryan Kohberger's DNA? You know, the chances of all these things happening have to be astronomical. Too big. I mean, it's just unlikely as hell. I think it adds up pretty easily. I'm not sure what doesn't add up. You have troubled guy. He's gotten fired from every job he's had, even the fish job, the TA job. He was forced to resign as a security guard while he was in DeSales University. He was a security guard at his old elementary or high school. You know, so he's forced to resign there. You know, the only place that he's been, you know, not had issues that we're aware of is the professor that recommended him for the PhD program. And yet we find out later she's never met Bryan Kohberger in person, and that class was during the COVID years, and they had online classes. I think it adds up pretty well. I mean, the guy's got problems. He's got problems everywhere. Apparently he's got some social problems. Can't get, you know, he needs his daddy to ask people to be his friends. You know, his ideal night on a Saturday night is driving around. If he's not lying, is driving alone by himself with his phone off for hours at a time. You know, so there's a lot of problems there. There's a lot of red flags, tons of them. And then when you add the evidence that's there, I mean, it adds up pretty quick to me. Pretty simple too. Let's see. BK and his father mentioned the Pullman shooting on the Indiana officer. This was the morning of December 15th. Don't you wonder how they knew? Because they were in Indiana when the shooting took place. He got an alert on his phone. You know, when you are a college student at WSU and something happens on college grounds, you get an alert on your phone. Plus, like you said, it was 2 days later. Like, I mean, how many of you guys knew about the murders on the 15th of November? I sure as hell did. A lot of you guys knew about the Idaho murders on the 15th of November. I was 2 days after the murders. So, you know, especially if you're from that town and stuff like that, or you were staying there at that time, then yeah, I'm not sure why he wouldn't have known that. Let's see. Oh yeah. Let's see. The latest is that Dylan brought in low-class druggies, friends. Nobody felt safe. Maddie said if it was Maddie said F it and flush drugs she found. Where do you get this from? that Maddie said F it and flushed down these drugs. Where do you get that Dylan brought in low-class druggie friends? Where is this coming from? Like, what probable cause affidavit says that? What warrant says that? What Facebook post says that? What Instagram post says that? Where are these? If these guys were so much into all this stuff, where's the evidence of it? Don't you think somebody would have came forward and said, nah, yeah, and outside of Dave and Kim, who, I don't think she's lying about what she's saying. I just don't think the information she has is very accurate. Kim didn't get the information that her daughter supposedly found out at 10:30 the day of the murders. She got that information weeks later, after she had hounded her daughter for days about what time she found out. Now, let's remember this. This is noon on a Sunday, right? Football game was the weekend after the last football game. Just because there wasn't partying done at Kaylee Goncalves' house doesn't mean there wasn't partying done throughout the entire city or the two cities that were there. Come on now. Everybody else was partying. Just because one person isn't doesn't mean the entire city is quiet like like you would think. Just that one area, that one spot right there where you had the King Road residence, and then you had that one other house down the street where Jack DeCore lived. And apparently Jack DeCore and his friends were where? At the corner club. So even though they weren't partying per se, they were still out clubbing. They were out at a bar drinking. So, but where does all this low class stuff come from? Like, I don't get it. And when it comes to Dave, about him and his story, I've said it multiple times. Dave told me where he works. On Sundays, where he worked at was in the mall. And on Sundays, the mall don't open up until 11:30. Not 9:30. Okay? He wasn't there. He wasn't awake. And if he woke up at 9:30 and called in to work and said, hey, 4 people passed away, don't you think his manager been like, what the hell are you talking about? Now, he wasn't trying to remember his story day one, right? He didn't come out November 15th saying, hey, everybody, we knew all this earlier and ahead of time. No, he said this like 3 months later, after he was reflecting on what he thought he remembered. And I believe him that he woke up at 9:30 and got wind of some stuff and called in sick. But I think that happened on Monday, the day after, when the mall does open at 10 and he needs to be there at 9:30. Get what I mean? So, yeah. Nobody's come forward. And you know what? Dave told me that he had friends that had text messages and stuff, and that they have sent it to him, that he has pictures of them. Guess how many pictures I got? That's right. None. Not one. Not a single one. All right, let's remove this. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying that, you guys are wrong for thinking this or that. I'm just asking, where's the proof? Where's the evidence of these claims? You want to give Bryan Kohberger the benefit of the doubt, but yet you want to throw these victims' names in the mud. And it doesn't make any sense to me. It makes zero sense to me. You're wrong right here. Stacy says, I heard single source DNA is general term they use about the DNA profile, not relevant to if it came from a mixture. No, this is 100% wrong. We just had on Steve, who was a retired CSI officer. We've had on a medical forensic death investigator who has a master's degree in forensics. A single source DNA is exactly that. It's single source. If there was 2 sources of DNA, it'd be a mixed source. Single source, one person. Single source. 2 sources together, mixed source. So wherever somebody's telling you this, if somebody's literally saying that is a term, I would second guess the information coming out of whoever's telling you this information, because they're making you look bad when you say it elsewhere. And I'm not trying to be mean, but some of the things, and it's not just to you, Stacy, I'm not trying to point you out. There's been some things that have been said in the comment section that are just out of this world, out of this world. And You know, sometimes it frustrates me. It is what it is, because, you know, these are real people, real lives that were lost. And I find it disrespectful sometimes when people are willing to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, when literally his DNA was under the body of a victim. You know, his car was out there on video. You know, his phone was off during that time. I mean, everything that leads up, they're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to these victims, they had to have had something to do with why it happened to them, and they're behind this completely. It's just remarkable, the dots that people connect sometimes. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be ugly. And I'm not trying to tell people they shouldn't have an opinion. If you have an opinion, you want to wait until trial, and you think that you want to see the evidence before you make your decision, you know, you have that 100%. You know, I don't necessarily have a problem with a person that has a different opinion either way, but I find it weird that there are some people that anybody could have done this crime. You know, FBI agents, the chief of police, Fry, could have committed this crime. You know, somebody in Colorado that once owned a house could have committed this crime. Anybody, you know, the parents could have committed this crime, except for Bryan Kohberger. There's no way Bryan Kohberger could have committed this crime. And that's where I have, like, my frustration kind of boils down to, is like, come on now. You can't even, you know, think that there's a possibility or a world where the reason why his phone was off because he was committing the murders. The reason why there's a white Elantra without a front license plate around that house is because he was around that house. The reason why his DNA is on the sheath is because he touched it at one point without a glove. You know, and for those that say, you know, brass degrades DNA faster, this, that, and the third. Well, like we had Steve on, remember, real retired CSI. He talked about evidence like that would be expedited to the nearest, you know, state lab for processing. So if it was on on brass that degrades it quicker, well, that means that piece of DNA must have been applied sooner. It couldn't have been applied, you know, a day earlier, because it would have been destroyed. It couldn't have been applied a week earlier. It had to have been applied relatively soon. Bryan Kohberger, by his own admission, was out and about by himself that night in his car. So where did his DNA come from in that short period of time in that window where it was applied on that sheath if he didn't leave it on there himself? You know, so for those that are arguing that brass degrades DNA quicker is only proving the point that it only could have been Bryan Kohberger. Hit that like and subscribe. The sheath was not found by two officers. I think one officer stated that they found it, and the other one says that Idaho State Lab had to tell them afterwards. And we found out recently that it was kind of slightly underneath the thigh of Maddie Mogen, and it was partially covered. And when you look at the PC, it doesn't say that they could see the sheath from the door. It says they could see the sheath on this location when viewed from the door, meaning that's where he was standing, and that's where the location is. Not that you could see it from the door, just that that's on the right side when viewed from the door. I hope that makes sense. It doesn't. I know it's a play on words, and I get it. The probable cause affidavit was written very poorly. We've already determined that. And I wish it would have just said that, although when, you know, not visible, it was on Maddie Mogen's right side if you were standing at the door, you know, something of that nature. But it was already 19 freaking pages long. So I think they were probably doing some editing to kind of shrink it down a little bit. All right, one more. Let me see if I can find a good one. One more. There it is. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the fight. Let's talk about struggle and people not hearing things. There was audio that was taken. Well, you know, let me read this. This says from Drew, if there was a fight, how did the other roommates not hear, like, the items in the room crashing around or falling on the floor? Those rooms were small. Well, there was audio taken 50 feet away from Xana's room. and it picked up a thump. It picked up whimpers or whispers. It picked up a dog barking. It didn't pick up any screaming or yelling, kicking, any of those things that you would have assumed would be noises that you would have heard of people, trying to fight for their lives. Then we also know that the DNA that they used to point at Bryan Kohberger was off of a sheath, and according to Ann Taylor, is transfer DNA. What that tells me is that there was no DNA underneath the fingernails of the victims or no hair that was left behind, because those type of things are more, it's more solid and more concrete than touch DNA, and they would have used that against Bryan Kohberger versus the touch DNA. That points to there also not being this fight for life. The fact that there was no transfer of DNA from Bryan Kohberger or anybody to the bodies of the victims. Which also brings the question, I mean, if you were to, think to yourself, somebody went in and killed 4 people with a knife, close together, very close proximity. There was no DNA left by the perpetrator, except on the DNA on the sheath. You take the sheath out of it, there's no DNA left on the perpetrator. If you don't find DNA there, where you would probably most think you would find it, whether it be hair, skin cells, sweat, whatever the case may be, if this person planned this out so well that they didn't leave any DNA behind, and they weren't there no freaking 8 hours or anything like that. They were there between 4 and 4:19 and they left. 4:05 and 4:19 and they left. Now I know that people say, "Oh, the Dylan and them, they were there, for 8 hours." Well, we already heard from the coroner. It was messy. It was blood everywhere in those rooms. It wasn't cleaned up. So why is it that people will say that there was no DNA in the car, right, when Bryan Kohberger had 8 weeks or 7 weeks to clean it? The girls had 8 hours to clean the house, based on that theory. Doesn't make sense. And 2, if Bryan Kohberger went to that extent to prepare for no DNA from him being dropped onto the bodies, what makes you think he didn't prepare for that car? For when he gets in and then after the fact when he cleans it. Now, a lot of people say, well, if he cleaned it, there should be bleach and stuff. Well, we talked to those forensic CSI guys and forensic experts. Bleach only lasts 24 hours. So it's not like it would have been on there. And if it was a bleach additive, that would have allowed for, for colors not to stain, that also would have dissipated fairly quickly and would have had to destroy the blood as well. So also the last thing I wanted to talk on, because I saw it in the comment section, somebody mentioned connections, right? Ann Taylor said there was no connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims, and people are saying no connection. That means he wasn't following them, wasn't messaging them. Well, if they didn't follow him back and they never opened the messages, and if they were left unread, I guess they didn't connect. So just because Ann Taylor saying there's no connection doesn't mean that there isn't one, a real one. The defense attorney is there to try to bring up reasonable doubt. But that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys liked this show. It's a lot longer than I anticipated, about 40 minutes longer than I wanted to go. But I thought it was all good stuff and good information to put out there. Everybody has an entitlement to their own opinion, so please be nice in the comment section to each other. Even if you don't, you think one way or another. We haven't gone to trial, so technically everything is, I guess, up in the air until then. But please share this with anybody that that talks about the case, wants information on the case. We appreciate that. That being said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.